If we just start to say it's an absolute pleasure to be here talking with Mark, who I think I mentioned this morning has been working alongside the Community Foundation as a sort of business who's actually wanting to do lots of great stuff in the community. And so we thought today it would be really interesting just to talk about how Mark views the Beard Group, which is still a family business after 125 years. So it's one of Oxfordshire's great success stories, and obviously reaches out into other counties, Wiltshire, Bristol and beyond. So, but one of the things that strikes me is the values that run through your business, Mark. And perhaps you might like to just talk through what those are and how that actually affects your dealings with clients on a day-to-day basis.
Just in terms of values, as a business, we have three values: friendly, efficient, committed. And I think most people who come into contact with our business say that we live the friendly, we live the committed values. The efficient one is more a work in progress. And in terms of sort of summing up what they mean, I would just say that sort of trying to be decent in all our dealings would be sort of the overall view in terms of how we try and live our values. We try and create a enjoyable working environment and also be better tomorrow than we are today. In terms of way we put it over to staff is that we say that we have two bank accounts. One is our financial bank account and the other is our reputational bank account. And all that we do, the projects that we build, have got to make a deposit in both. There's no point making a shed load of money and wrecking one's reputation. Similarly, there's no point in terms of doing a wonderful job and running out of money to pay one's bills. So it's a balance between those two concepts.
I like that, Mark, because I was a little bit, being a banker myself in a former life, I was trying to work out what was your reputation? Did you actually physically have one? But I mean, I think that sums it up absolutely perfectly. And it's like everything in life, isn't it? You have to put back in what you take out. So I think that's a really good motto, perhaps, which is obviously working for you. But in terms of your customers, how do you think they're responding to working with you in that way? Do they feel the values?
I think they do. But not only the customers, our supply chain as well. And I'd say a lot of it actually comes down to trust, that we all make mistakes in this world. But if one's customers see one is doing one's absolute best, there's always a way forward. And that sort of underpins the way we operate, the relationships we have. And dare I say it, it keeps us out of the hands of lawyers and litigation.
So do you think then that most things, if you've got good trust and good relationships, you can solve problems? Because I mean, the construction industry is one for litigation and lots of suits when maybe there's snagging that doesn't get sorted. So do you think that idea of relationship is really important in that and has kept you out of the courts?
Crucial. I think to a certain extent, one has to look at the product one is delivering. In our case, it's a building through service to our customers. And if one is solely focused on that, it means that a lot of those commercial issues look after oneself, because it creates the goodwill, creates the trust, and that when there are challenges, one works together, customers, our own staff, supply chain, to overcome them.
And would you say that's sort of being proactive? So you mentioned, you make mistakes. So putting your hand up and actually avoiding it becoming a problem. So just being very proactive and honest.
It's partly about one's putting one's hand up. But in our industry, there's lots and lots of grey areas. And it's a case of being objective in terms of what responsibility lies with oneself. And if one is open with that, other people then tend to come to discussion in similar light.
Okay. And how frequently, as the sort of managing director of the company, would you say that you sort of pick up the phone and call people? I mean, is that part of would you say that's a key thing that you do?
I perhaps should do more of it. It's one of the things that I felt is crucial during the last 2 months is to be picking up the phone and speaking to people. And one of the things that I was particularly pleased to do was I had feedback on 25, 30 of the suppliers that had really gone beyond what you could reasonably expect during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I picked up the phone to them, and having occasionally given them a kicking in the past, I was very, very pleased to say thank you. What you've done is very special and appreciated and won't be forgotten.
Wow, that's brilliant. I mean, we've had a few comments in the chat, Mark, around the idea of the bank accounts, that idea of the reputational bank account, that seems to have really sort of hit the mark. Someone else suggesting that maybe we need a green bank account for the carbon offsetting. I mean, I don't know where you sit on that, but
I'd say we're pragmatic environmentalists, that there's a lot all of our organisations can do to help the environment, but at the same time as helping the environment is also just good housekeeping, good business to minimise waste, keep one's costs down, actually have renewable energies within one's own offices, encourage staff down the road of minimising the miles they drive. Those are win-wins. And then sort of moving beyond that to carbon offsetting is, I think, something that all business should either be doing now or have a plan for the future on. So I like the idea of 3 bank accounts as opposed to 2. Perhaps one day I'll be a banker like you, Jayne.
Well, you see, there's an idea. You could take that idea forward now. You've got 3 bank accounts. That's the power of Bio 2020. But I guess, in terms of what you are doing in the community, because this is very much a session about, business as a force for good. How would you describe to somebody who didn't know about all the many great things that the Beard Group do, what's actually the key driver behind that and why you want to work in that way?
I think the first thing, as building contractors, we take resources from the community, and we're sort of very aware of that. And each of the areas that we work in, we like to give back. And we can't just put the materials we've taken out of the ground back in the ground. But what we can do is form relationships with individual charities and organisations within the communities. Partly to give them funds, but also encourage our staff to get involved. And 3 years ago, having set up the Beard Charitable Foundation under the auspices of Oxfordshire Community Foundation.
Thank you so much.
A key part of what Beard Charitable Foundation does is match fund staff who raise money or give their time to charities. So it's being a facilitation in terms of greater good as well as what we do ourselves. But I'd actually go beyond that, is that increasingly people are wanting to work for organisations that have a purpose. And having a charitable foundation isn't an end in its own right, but adds to that purpose and the reason people come into work and give that discretionary time and commitment that makes a difference.
And they learn skills as well, don't they? Because I know we've talked a lot about it's this exchange of skills and transferable relationships, things that can really be good for some of your younger employees who I've met, who get a lot in terms of personal development by, giving of their time and realizing that actually Beard is a really good place to work because it's actually training me and giving me other opportunities. So there's a wider aspect there, isn't there?
I'm a big fan of encouraging our staff to get involved with charities wherever possible, joining the board and working with different people. That as a 25, 30-year-old, actually getting on a board with some experienced business people, academics and others is far better than any training we could give them. And dare I say it, far better than the training you would get at a business school. Albeit to say that in Oxford with a great side business school is perhaps tempting fate.
But it's real and raw, isn't it? And I think one of the things I know from speaking to 1 or 2 of your employees, the biggest challenge is the lack of resources in many of the charities. So I guess that's an encouraging thing for them to see, that there is an exchange, a very powerful exchange, and that opens their eyes, because I don't think any of us know what it's really like until we've experienced things on the other side, have we? So
yeah. And you're a great example of that, Jayne, being such a catalyst for bringing people together.
Well, thank you. That's what we call it, joining up the dots. So is it time to bring any other questions in, do you think? I mean, we've got one or two more questions we can ask Mark, but generally, I think this idea of the bank accounts, the reputational and the financial aspects of your business are equally important, and perhaps reputationally even more so. And I know this morning there was a bit of a preview, Mark, and one of the things that was coming out was actually how you respond in a crisis is very much about who you are as a business, and maybe we don't spend enough time really thinking about what would we do if we could be better. So I don't know if there's anything out of this crisis that you thought actually as a business, what might it have been? Could we have been better prepared?
I think this crisis has tested us all to the nth degree. And I think the first reaction when the crisis struck was to selfishly look at one's own needs and what one had to do to get one's life, one business into a fit state. But 2 or 3 weeks on from that, one realised that there was a lot of people out there in far more challenging positions. And I think continuing to give to charities and practically supporting them is as important during the crisis as any time. And even if you're feeling really hard up, just still giving something, keeping in the habit, is something I strongly encourage. It took me 2 or 3 weeks to realise that. I'm very pleased that I've got back on the horse and continued giving.
Well, and we appreciate that very much. Is that a sentiment shared by others on the call? I mean, do you think generally, as humans, our first concern is to look out for ourselves? Obviously, this is highlighted by the need for everyone to have to try and keep safe and stay home. I think what Mark's describing was just a set of circumstances that made it almost impossible not to do anything other. But for those running businesses, I know there were very sort of quick decisions that had to be made around furloughing staff and, difficult things. And I know that's something that, Mark, you've had to do as well, haven't you?
We had to furlough just over a quarter of our staff. And we also had to go through short-term salary cuts. And I agonised over that. But as well as getting it right for the individuals, one has to look long-term. And part of managing a business is being tough but empathetic with one's staff during difficult times. And I think if we'd done nothing, that people would have been more concerned than if we took limited actions to safeguard the long-term position of the business, which we did promptly, but then we gave people over a month's warning in terms of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really good to know. And there have been some sort of comments around whether businesses can rise to the challenge of being human, because I think Dominic's saying that, humans have actually been amazing throughout all of this. But you used the word, empathy. And I think that's a real example that businesses can act like humans if we just put a little bit of care around what we do and understand it's people, isn't it? It's not just the bricks and mortar or the profit. It's actually people that are moving around and enabling you to do business.
I would add to that and say that during normal business times, it's very important to communicate with customers, suppliers, and staff. But actually, during a crisis like we had at the moment, we've really got to over communicate, because the risk is if you don't communicate, a black hole forms and a whole variety of rumours circulate in that. And I think that's one of the lessons for me, is to wake up each morning with communications as one of the sort of big challenges, and just ringing people up and having a 5-minute chat, so much more powerful than a 2-3 paragraph email that
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, I think one of the things that we did, we actually celebrated our 25th anniversary in the middle of the lockdown on the 25th April. And I think one of the little things that I did was actually to physically send post as well to the staff to say thank you, so little thank you cards. And I think it's quite amazing how those little personal touches meant so much, especially in this sort of world where we're always online and we can see each other now, which is helpful. But it is reaching out in an unexpected way, which I think is the thing that humans do so well, isn't it? Is when someone smiles at you when you're when maybe you're looking down and walking down the street. So I guess those are things that we just need to build into our businesses, and remember that we are humans ourselves, which I think is coming out of the comments, that businesses are just made up of lots of human people. So if we allow people to be themselves in the workplace, then we'll probably get much better values.
I think the other thing as a business leader, that you spend an awful lot of time worrying about the business, worrying about other people, strategizing for the future. But you also need to occasionally sit back and think about yourself, your family, and you do actually have a responsibility to keep yourself healthy during these times. And sometimes that gets put to the bottom of the list. And anyone who's out there running a business, and there's sectors that are far more challenged than construction, still try and find some time for yourself and keep yourself mentally and physically healthy, because that is best for your business and your employees.
That's brilliant. So what have you been doing, Mark, to keep yourself healthy? I did share a little secret where I thought you might be. So let's see whether we got it right. What have you been doing recently to keep fit and things?
So I've actually got my bike out the garage, and 3 days out of 4 I'm out on my bike, quite often with my children, who are increasingly getting fitter and faster than me. But in effect, I've substituted the hour I spend in the car each day for an hour of exercise, and I'm feeling better for it from that point of view.
And I bet your son and daughter are really happy for it too.
They are when they beat me. And yourself, Jayne, what are you doing?
Well, I haven't actually managed to find time for any yoga or all these things that everyone's doing. I think the whole team, quite a few of them have got young children, so they have been doing homeschooling and having Joe Wicks's workouts. So I'm feeling like I desperately need to, but it's really easy not to do it. So I think that's the key thing here, though, isn't it? It's to make use of the time that we've bought ourselves back. So it's good that you're managing to do that.
So you're an example, Jayne, of someone who's spending all their time thinking about other people and looking after them. So half an hour a day for yourself might be what you learn from Bio 2020.
It might be. I think I've just got a new puppy actually called Molly. She's a red fox Labrador. So she's adorable. And I'm hoping that will actually come true, Mark, because, yeah, it would be good. And I like walking. So it shouldn't be difficult. So I'm conscious of the time. We have a few minutes left. Do you have any last sort of word of wisdom? I think the chat, just looking at the chat, as we said, generally lots of supportive comments that business appears to be that perhaps this is the moment that we've been waiting for. But there is a question from, I think, Grant saying he believes that construction is one of the most difficult industries to pivot in ways that it operates, because obviously you did need people. People are, is there anything particular that you will be doing because of this that might change the way your operation works?
One of the things we found on site is that we've had to reduce down the number of people to achieve the 2-metre social distancing, but that has created a much calmer atmosphere. So having 30 people on site rather than the usual 40, 45 has meant that each individual has got more room, and that they have been able to produce more individually and probably to a better quality than beforehand. That doesn't mean that overall we're producing more. Overall, we're slightly down. But I do think that there are lessons there for our industry in terms of putting the efforts into planning, keeping the site conditions clean, tidy, healthy, and having less people working more effectively. As a country, actually, particularly as an industry, our productivity has been woeful over the last 10 or 15 years. I think that's partly because the immediate answer is if we've got more to do, we need more people. Whereas the real answer is getting those people to work in a smarter way.
Which brings us back to your values, which was efficiency. And I guess that you were very honest at the beginning, and you said that's the one that you're actually still working on and you need to improve. But I guess just a passing question from me is, do you think the idea of having less people, that ultimately in the workplace, businesses could become more effective with less people? Because you said if we spent more time in the planning, we may be able to have less people, which has ramifications elsewhere, doesn't it?
As a country pre-COVID-19, we had extremely full employment levels. And in fact, we were looking to other parts of the world to fill skills gaps. And travelling, immigration will be far more challenging post-COVID. And if that forces us to look to see how we can make better use of the skills of the natural inhabitants here and work more efficiently, that will be one massive gain for the country, for individual companies like mine, that coming through this crisis. And sometimes crises do force one to adopt new ways of working that you tend to put to one side during better times.
Well, I think that's an incredibly optimistic note to end on, Mark, because I know there's a session later on today around inclusive recruitment, which I think follows on from that. You know, we do have people that are currently economically inactive in our country. So I think that that's absolutely perfect. And I wish you all the best with improving that one value of being extra efficient. But you're a great example of a business that is a force for good across the county and beyond. So thank you, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. And to all our guests online, thank you for your time. And I hope you've enjoyed the conversation with us. But see you soon.